Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Workday Morning Show. I'm your host, Tony Gilfillan. It is February 11th, and we are going to get started. So today, I kind of wanted to shift gears a little bit. We had been building that expenses app that did function. It essentially created my recurring expenses uh, expense report. Was able to pull in from a SOAP UI or SOAP API that was then able to create the expense report and attempt to submit the expense report. My little agent that I had built did not have access to basically submit that expense report. So that was basically just came down to a permissions issue um, with the actual API call. So that was a pretty simple fix that um, we've done several times on this stream alone. So I wanted to shift gears into answering a question that is constantly coming up and affecting, you know, developers and software companies across the board is like, are these vibe coding AI agents actually able to replace these, big SaaS platforms like the Slacks and the Salesforces and the Workdays and even the bigger Microsoft Azures of the world and like big hosting platforms? Like, is this coding revolution actually going to be able to create these bespoke applications on the fly by just vibe coding? I think the most obvious answer is no. I think basically the quality of code coming out of these things is surprisingly good, but the fact is that it doesn't take into consideration infrastructure and different security and the different roles of people accessing this data and where it lives and how it all ties together. Um and and that's the biggest crux of this all, is that I mean, maybe as of today, February 11th at 11:03 a.m., no, it cannot crank out enterprise grade software, but can you create smaller pieces of, specialized software to solve different use cases? And I think that is a yes. So, my particular use case that we are solving here at Workday is, we're hosting hackathons, we're hosting different events, and we have to essentially cobble these larger enterprise solutions into these smaller events and smaller venues and smaller use cases. So a hackathon, our particular hackathon here at Workday at DevCon, if you guys were on the DPC yesterday, as it was announced, we are having DevCon at Resorts World this year, June 1st to the 4th. That will be an exciting time. But at that particular conference, we host also the hackathon, and there we have to leverage some way to essentially enable our experts to help our hackers to get over the humps and deal with the new technology or run into issues on certain things. Like, people need help at hackathons. So how do you handle that help, especially in a large scale hackathon where you have hundreds if not thousands of people hacking, and then several dozen experts that you have to coordinate and send out to help different tickets, get answers answered as quick as possible. And that usually comes through some form of chat application or ticketing application. We've used a number of things in the past. I believe the very first thing that we used in the very first hackathon that we ran was just using our forum to essentially handle those, and it worked. And we've essentially evolved into using a Slack bot that is currently what we are using to both use for chatting with our hackers as well as announcements and submitting your submissions for the hackathon, as well as handling all of the ticketing for expert help within the hackathon. So my thought process here is, can this, like a vibe coded solution, actually replace something as robust as Slack? So obviously, I don't think it's going to be like a fully fledged, enterprise grade chat application that has all the bells and whistles that a major corporation would need to effectively you know deploy this at a Fortune 500 company. But for a hackathon purpose, when you're only having a couple hundred people from a bunch of different companies that may or may not be able to access Slack on their company networks, can we build something that solves this purpose and can actually have viable data and viable security measures and multi-factor, and is actually an application that we are willing to rubber stamp and say this is legit, this works, this can actually fit our purpose. And that's kind of what I want to go down that rabbit hole, is can we build a hackathon app that is actually viable to replace some sort of software solution. I'm not saying, again, this is not replacing Slack as a whole for an enterprise grade company. I'm saying this is solving a small solution for a temporary problem, aka a hackathon that happens over 2 days, and you don't want to pay enterprise licensing for a 2-day event. So let's see if we can essentially create that for myself. My thought process here is I'm going to start in plan mode in Cursor to kind of talk through requirements of this app, and then also how we're going to build this out. I let it kind of plan for me and build out the architecture of the application itself. My guess is it's going to go into like a Node React type of UI with the connections, and I also want to essentially tie in to Workday as acting as our backend. So I don't want to have to pay a lot of hosting fees for this thing to be stood up. I don't want to have to maintain a database, as well as message brokering. I want I want a small application, a really lightweight application that can tie into my existing registration process that actually leverages a Workday Extend app to let users go in, build their teams, and then we use that data to create their organizations and their tenants that hackers use at the actual event. So I want to tie all this together. I want that application to be able to essentially be my source of truth for the hackathon app itself, to chat with those users, to get their information. And again, I want this to be in a very secure way. I don't want this to be accessible to the masses. This needs to essentially be run locally, accessible on a local area network that everyone's going to be accessing at the event. And I also want multi-factor to be built into this, so it won't be easily accessible to malicious actors outside of this particular event. Let's start talking to Cursor, and I haven't actually played with Cursor 1.5 since it got released earlier this week, so I'm curious to see how plan mode behaves differently with the new APIs that it has created. So let's go ahead and start talking to this thing. I want to start planning a application that messaging platform, ticketing platform for a hackathon of, we'll say, up to 1,000. Future proof this thing just a bit. This application should use Workday business objects actually not just business objects, we'll just say Workday data as a source of truth. Include worker data well as business objects created. Tickets, chat logs, error handling. This will be so to run this locally. I'm just trying to think. That could be problematic, especially in a environment where everyone is off of a trusted network. So this is we'll just start this as a hosted app. My favorite little platform on render. Probably move that to something a little bit more robust eventually, Heroku or something. Let's see what else here. We want it to be a ticketing app. We want it to be a messaging platform. That alone is pretty massive. It's going to need additional questions. Ask me clarifying questions. Design and architecture. Zoom. Find the solution work. And I also want it to, so I have the actual Slack bot that we use today in a little side app here that I want it to reference for kind of recreating that piece in the new app. Reference Slack tickets main as reference the existing All right, let's see how it starts playing here. Ideally, it starts asking me additional questions. I'm sure it will have a variety of things because, again, this is a very robust use case, not just a little one-off situation. How should we integrate with Workday? Do you have Workday credentials? We will be doing OAuth to assuming the scheduled sync means it's referring to not essentially tokens that will need refreshed. We actually will create an ISU for this. Technology stack do you prefer for the back end and front end? Assumed, yeah. It was do Python within front end. You like Flask? Let's do Flask app. What database should we use? JSON files won't scale to 1,000. I guess we'll use Postgres for now. Messaging platform, real chat, polling. How will users authenticate? Can't really do SSO because it's not going to tie into both the credentials on no password with multi-factor baked into it as well. What front end framework use? So this one, the current Workday data we deal with is really the team data. So like the worker name, worker email, team name, table number, and then like tenant information. How should we determine who is an expert? Manual assignment by admin in types of messaging should the platform support? Direct messages, group chats, channels, and ticket threads. Render this be a single web service or separate web service, separate API front end. What web services? With single service for now. I see what it's talking about there. Let's start reviewing this. It's all funky when you try to read this while it's still writing. Oh, gee. I always wonder, like, is it actually typing this, or is it just kind of buying time while it's still thinking? Because it definitely doesn't take this long to write to a markdown file. It's like lazy loading. All right, let's go to the top and actually read what this thing is trying to build. All right, backend, Python, Flask, WebSockets. Front end is React. Postgres is a database. Application, Flask login with session management, Workday integration, REST APIs. Deployment on render. This will have to change. The Workday data. Correct. What we need. Custom worker means your data table team name. Can't remember if it's tenant URL. What did we call that company? Called it company or org? Company. Those are the individual companies that hackers have to access their tenant, so everyone's not sharing applications across each other. And then ticket number, reporter, description, location, table, status, priority, assignee, close, time. Perfect, chat, content, thread, channel, chat log, assignment. That'd be for like the admin piece of things. Workday integration, scheduled sync, using an APS schedule or Celery. Worker data from Workday. Scheduled once. Once registration is finished, this Workday integration really doesn't need to happen more than once. Basically, it's push data from the Workday tenant into this hackathon system, and everything should then be done in the messaging platform. Really no need to update data unless you're handling all the ticket data in Workday business objects, which would ease the amount of use on a third-party database. I have to think on that one. Might just lean on Postgres. Authentication, authorization, ticketing system, creation, management, leaderboard, error handling, project structure. Just the steps it's going to go through on setting all this up. And then deployment, security considerations, Workday credentials, session security, SQL injection. And then a bunch of views to create. What is the type of custom Workday object? Hacker information. I know the exact name. What is the relationship between the worker and the custom object? 1-to-1. Are there any other fields in this custom object we should capture besides table, name, tenant, and company? That should. Also like to explore using Workday custom objects, manage the ticketing process. I actually would, now that I'm thinking about it even more so, having all the tickets live inside Workday gives us a lot more ability to report on those tickets without having to basically build an analytics platform to analyze, all the time to close, and what were the big issues, like, because we definitely take that into consideration every year, is like, where were the problems coming up, what was the biggest issue, what was taking the longest to solve. All that data is super important to definitely report on. And if that data lives in Workday, then we can actually just spin up reports right off of that data. So I think that's kind of where my head's at with having the ticketing system not necessarily live in Workday Extend, but definitely leveraging the back end for reporting purposes. Where should be tickets stored as a source of truth? Oh, that's a good idea. Postgres is cache, and then sync to Workday. Bidirectional sync. I think I just want Postgres to be kind of that broker to make things quicker. What should be the primary workflow for ticket creation updates? App creates, update tickets, links to Workday. It creates tickets, app reads and displays. Yeah. Basic fields that should custom object contain. We can add more later, but need core fields. I want all of the fields. How should real-time ticket updates work if tickets are in Workday? Yeah, I essentially want the Postgres database to be effectively updated on a pretty regular schedule. Should chat messages also be stored in Workday custom objects or stay in Postgres? I guess that's a question. Don't really poke around your guys' chat messages after the fact. Postgres only should be fine for that. I definitely like the questions it's been asking me. So I need to start doing that too, is just adding to each prompt that, or there's also cursor rules where you can basically tell it that, every question you ask, make sure that it's, 100% sure that this is a viable solution, or ask me clarifying questions. I definitely need to update my cursor rules to just do that. Because it has definitely refined this just simple design into a much more robust design. So I think we got a pretty solid start here. I'm gonna start this thing just building away, and we'll see what it comes up with tomorrow. So I'm gonna click build, and we'll kind of review what happens tomorrow. Thanks, guys.